Howdy. Well, I'm in the Pacific Northwest this week, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm just loving it here. It's so green. The soil is just that living, rich, organic dirt you don't find down in the Southwest. It's so lush here. Got a lot of edible plants out on the ground already, things we won't be seeing down in Arizona and other parts for another 6 to 8 weeks. It's so lush here. I'm only about a half an hour east of Portland, Oregon. I just came from the eastern part of Oregon where I was teaching a survival class out there for a group, and we were in the Great Basin Desert, so open and scrub and sagebrush. And then you drive a couple of hours west and you're in this lush, beautiful green belt of old growth trees and this foliage on the ground, this undergrowth. It's just incredible. It's the land of plenty. If I wasn't living in the Southwest, didn't like the desert as much as I do, I would probably if I had to go back in time, I'd probably transport myself back to the Pacific Northwest, Northern California, Western Oregon, British Columbia, because in these environments you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the bounty of the ocean and all that it brings with it, and then you've got the bounties of the forest and the resources there, from deer hunting and the salmon in the rivers, and it's just incredible here. Plus, it's a pretty nice environment. It's not too extreme. You don't have a lot of the nasties like rattlesnakes and scorpions and mosquitoes, clouds of black mosquitoes like you do in the North Country. So this is a really lush environment for living in. And one thing, I do when I travel around, I make my living as a survival instructor traveling around. I'm blessed to be able to do that and grateful to be able to travel to these different regions and see different life zones and learn different skills. And the one thing that I always do and that I recommend to students of mine is when you go to an area, look at what was done there before by the native peoples, what's still used there. The native cultures of that area are the template, are the blueprint for surviving and living in that environment. Why reinvent the wheel? So if you can't talk to them directly, go to some of the cultural centers. Go to the museums for sure if you have time. Museums are great repositories of traditional artifacts and knowledge, and you can learn a lot by studying those, taking notes, taking photographs if they allow that. And I learned a lot about making different types of tools and how certain technologies were utilized. So rather than trying to figure it out on your own, look at what was done before in the archaeological record, prehistorically, and what's being done by the native peoples at present for hunting and fishing and gathering, and what types of food plants were used, medicinal plants and that kind of thing. One of the things here in the Northwest that's key is obviously fishing. So if I had more time, I would certainly be doing some of that. I'm only out here for a few days and I got to zip back and get going on another course. But one thing that you'd want to bring up here, if you're new to this environment or if you're going to a place like Alaska or Canada, is some really good fishing tackle. For the bare bones, I would recommend getting a collapsible fishing pole. If Shakespeare still makes those, I've got a little one at home with a pretty decent reel. I'll get a few dozen fishing hooks, put those on a safety pin, get some split shot sinkers, and then I'll get a handful of assorted artificial baits, and then some artificial lures, some silver spoon lures and that kind of thing, and bring those. And then I'll find out when I get to that region what people are using for bait and what's being caught and what works and what doesn't and that kind of thing. But you can live well in an area like this. The Columbia River's just half mile away from here. And if you had fishing tackle, you're living in the backcountry or going into a remote area in Alaska, heck, the Amazon for that matter, and you want to be able to feed yourself, getting some quality fishing gear and taking it with you. And I'm not talking about investing hundreds of dollars here. We're talking about maybe $20 to $50 for a collapsible fishing pole and that kind of thing. I've probably caught more fish over the years using just hand fishing, hobo fishing it's called, off of a stick or off of a can, using just 6-pound test line, using an assortment of different hooks, and then trying to find some natural bait from the area, some worms, some grubs, some caterpillars, a grasshopper, that kind of thing. But if you're traveling to these areas that have rivers and lakes and waterfalls and they're so rich in riparian habitat, you definitely got to bring some fishing tackle. I packed away my kit already, my little Best Glide fishing kit. Best Glide's a company out of Texas that makes one of the better commercial fishing kits out there. Mine costs about $12. They have ones that cost $30, and they're not bad for survival fishing kits. If you just want something decent in a tin with an assortment of different hooks and lures and that kind of thing. If you want to make up your own kit, just get a little credit size card or a piece of cardboard the size of a credit card, put about 6 or 8 hooks in there of different sizes, and then wrap that with 50 feet of 6-pound test line, and you will have a fishing kit that you can use. That's an extreme minimalist kit for catching panfish, and I can be reeling in a sturgeon or a catfish with that stuff. But for catching the little guys, the panfish and sunfish and perch and bluegill and that kind of stuff, you can get by with one of those little kits if you just want something to tuck away in your pack for an emergency. But I've used that for years and years. I got my first fishing pole back in Michigan when I was 4 years old. I've still got that. Don't use it much. I'll pass that on to my kids eventually. Fishing poles, the big ones, that's the way that modern angling has gone today because of state conservation laws. And if we were using all the older methods like trot lines and damming up creeks and rivers and using fish baskets and fish poisons, our riparian areas, our rivers and lakes would quickly be depleted. So the conservation agencies about 100 years ago came up with this one pole angling method. Now that's great if you're doing that for leisure. If you're doing that to bring in the occasional trout or fish to your dinner plate at home. But if you're lost in the wilderness and you're surviving, it's a numbers game. So you want to put out 10 or 20 baited hooks off a trot line. That'll work. And then you bring in maybe 4 or 5 fish out of those 20 baited hooks you put in there. Or maybe if you got a small creek in the area, you can dam that up or create a rock dam and drive fish into there using a fish spear to catch them and that kind of thing. Trot lines, I used to use those when I was younger and they're very effective. They're still legal in some states, southeastern part of the U.S., some parts, Canada, different areas. But use the older methods if you're trying to live off the land. There's a reason that those have been outlawed, and for good reason, to protect our aquatic ecosystem so they're not denuded and stripped clean of fish. If we were all using those methods, there wouldn't be any fish left. So that's why the one pole method came in. But if you're lost, you're in a survival situation, you're trying to live off the land, you're stuck somewhere in a remote area for a couple of weeks, then set out 10 or 20 or 30 baited hooks all over the place in the creeks, and that is how you can feed yourself using some of the time-tested methods. Well, I'm going to go for a hike here and explore some more areas, a couple waterfalls that I sure don't want to miss, and this place is just a green assault on the eyes. It's so rich here compared to the desert Southwest. Thanks for watching. So these are the two fishing devices I was talking about. We've got a collapsible fishing pole here. It can fit down in your pack for extended trips. I usually bring it if I'm going on a week or 2 long backpack trip in an area where I know there's going to be good trout fishing and pan fishing. And this is a reel that comes with it. And this whole thing costs about $25 or so. And then here's a smaller kit. This is the one I was mentioning earlier, the Best Glide kit. This is a company out of Texas, and it's bestglide.com. They make some really good, probably the best commercial fishing kits. These go for $10, $20, $30 depending on what model you get. And then they also import British survival kits as well, but I like their fishing kits. You can see this has just the basics to get you started here. A couple of handmade excuse me, a couple of artificial lures, some split shots, some sinkers, some fishing line here, and this whole thing fits in this convenient little pouch. So if I'm going to be going into an area where maybe fishing isn't a primary concern, but I want to have one of these kits with me just in case, I'll bring one of these along. And then for the ultimate lightweight kit, you can just get a little credit card size piece of cardboard, tape some 5 or 6 fishing hooks of different sizes inside, and then wrap about 50 to 60 feet of 6-pound test line there, and you've got a little mini fishing kit you can fish off your hand with. But either of these will do the trick for a starter kit for small panfish or small trout here in most of the US. Well, thanks for watching. For more information on our field courses or survival books, you can visit apathways.com. Take care now.